"It's absolutely gorgeous, Megan," my mother exclaimed, running her fingers along the gleaming blue paint of my sister's brand new Honda Civic. "The color is perfect for you, sweetheart." I stood silently at the edge of our Lakeside driveway, watching as my parents fawned over both my sister and her graduation gift. The keys dangled from her manicured fingers, catching the afternoon sunlight as she twirled them triumphantly. "I can't believe it's really mine," Megan squealed, bouncing on her toes. "It's exactly what I wanted." My father beamed with pride, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. "Only the best for our future doctor. You'll need reliable transportation for medical school." I bit my tongue to keep from speaking. Just 3 weeks earlier, I'd sat across from them at our kitchen table, acceptance letter from Westlake University in my trembling hands, only to hear those crushing words. "We just can't afford your tuition right now, Alex. Maybe community college would be more practical." Yet here they stood, celebrating the $25,000 investment they'd just made in my younger sister's future. The same amount that would have covered my first year at Westlake. My name is Alex Wilson, and at 19, I just watched my college dreams evaporate while my parents bought my sister a new car. But what they didn't know, what they would learn years later, was that this moment wouldn't define my future. It would ignite it. I'd always been the practical one in the Wilson family. While Megan charmed everyone with her outgoing personality and seemingly effortless achievements, I worked quietly behind the scenes. My straight A's came from late-night studying rather than natural brilliance. My summer jobs paid for my own clothes and school supplies, while Megan's activities were deemed investments in her future. "Alex is so self-sufficient," my mother would tell her friends, as if my independence was somehow innate rather than necessary. What she called self-sufficiency was really just my adaptation to their indifference. When my Westlake University acceptance arrived, a school known for its prestigious business program, I thought finally they'd see me. The letter praised my exceptional work ethic and innovative thinking. I'd earned a partial merit scholarship, but would still need help with the remaining tuition. For once, I allowed myself to hope they'd invest in my future the way they always had in Megan's. "Westlake is very expensive," my father had said, barely glancing at the acceptance package. "And business degrees are a dime a dozen these days." "But I got a scholarship," I countered, pointing to the award letter. "And their entrepreneurship program is ranked in the top 10 nationally." My mother patted my hand like I was a child who didn't understand basic arithmetic. "It's still too much, honey. Besides, your sister's medical school will cost a fortune. We have to be practical." Practical, the word they used whenever Megan's needs superseded mine. As I watched them now, admiring Megan's new car, I realized I'd been naive to expect anything different. The disappointment was familiar, but this time, something else stirred beneath it. Something that felt surprisingly like determination. The disparity between how my parents treated Megan and me wasn't new, but the car made it impossible to ignore. That evening, as they took Megan out to celebrate at Riverside Grill, the expensive restaurant reserved for special occasions, I sat alone in our kitchen, calculated figures spread across the table. Lakeside Community College would cost roughly $4,000 per semester. My savings from 3 years of part-time work totaled $7,800. I could cover the first year, but barely. And community college wasn't Westlake. It didn't have the connections, the specialized programs, or the reputation that would help launch the business career I'd been planning. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Having lobster. Dad says to pick up milk on your way home if you go out." I placed my phone face down on the table. Even in their celebrations, they expected me to handle the practical details. The next morning, I found my father in his home office, reviewing some papers from his job at Meridian Insurance. He was a mid-level manager who often complained about being overlooked for promotions despite his 20 years with the company. "Dad, I wanted to talk about college again," I began. He sighed, not looking up. We've already discussed this, Alex. The timing isn't right. But you just spent $25,000 on Megan's car. That would have covered... That's different, he interrupted, finally meeting my eyes. Megan needs reliable transportation for medical. School interviews. It's an investment in her career. Besides, she's always been focused, known exactly what she wanted to do. The implication hung in the air, unlike me. I've known I wanted to start my own business since I was 15, said quietly. I've been working and saving and planning for years. Starting a business is a fantasy without capital or connections, he replied, turning back to his papers. Be realistic. Community college, then maybe transfer somewhere affordable for your junior year. That's the practical path for someone like you. Someone like you. The words stung more than they should have after all these years. Later that week, I watched as Megan packed for a weekend trip with friends, tossing clothes haphazardly into her designer suitcase, another gift from our parents. Don't you have work this weekend? She asked, noticing me in her doorway. I switched shifts, I replied, starting the community college orientation process. She nodded absently, more focused on whether to pack the blue or green sandals. That makes sense for you. Not everyone's cut out for a big university experience. Her casual dismissal reflected our parents' perspective so perfectly it was almost comical. Almost. You know, I said, I got into Westlake. Really? She looked genuinely surprised. I didn't know you'd even applied. Of course she didn't. No one had asked. What my family never understood, what they never bothered to discover, was that I possessed something far more valuable than Megan's natural charm or academic pedigree. Relentless determination paired with strategic thinking. I spent the summer between high school and community college working double shifts at Lakeside Coffee House and researching everything I could about business development, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship. During breaks, I devoured business, books, and free online courses. While Megan posted photos of beach trips in her new car, I was building something invisible to my family: knowledge, skills, and a plan. Professor Jack Harrison noticed it immediately in my first business fundamentals class at Lakeside Community College. You think differently than most first-year students, he commented after I'd presented a case study analysis that challenged the conventional approach. You're not just memorizing concepts, you're questioning them, improving them. After class, he invited me to speak further about my interests. Unlike my family, he actually listened. I want to build a digital marketing agency specializing in small businesses, I explained. Most local companies can't afford big agency fees, but they desperately need professional online marketing. There's a huge gap in the market. Instead of dismissing my idea as a fantasy, Professor Harrison nodded thoughtfully. The concept has merit. What's your timeline? I blinked, unused to having my ambitions taken seriously. 5 years, I said. I need to build skills, experience, and capital first. Smart approach, he said. Too many young entrepreneurs rush in without foundation. But tell me, why marketing? You seem to have analytical skills that might suit other fields. The question made me pause. No one had ever asked about the why behind my goals before. Marketing combines creativity with strategy, I finally answered. It's about understanding psychology, trends, and technology all at once, and when done right, it provides measurable results. I like being able to prove my worth through metrics and outcomes. Professor Harrison studied me for a moment. I think you just articulated why you've been underestimated, Alex. People often miss the strategic mind behind a quiet exterior. In that moment, I realized my invisibility within my family had taught me something invaluable: how to observe, analyze, and plan without anyone noticing. The skills that would ultimately become my greatest competitive advantage had been forged in the shadow of my sister's spotlight. The true turning point came 3 months into my community college experience. I'd maintained perfect grades while working 30 hours weekly at the coffee shop. My routine was exhausting but sustainable, until I came home one evening to find my parents and Megan discussing her medical school applications over dinner. "Boston University looks promising," my father said, reviewing her list, "though it's one of the more expensive options." "But it's my dream school," Megan replied, with the practiced pout that had been securing her desires since childhood. My mother reached for her hand. "Then we'll make it work, sweetheart. We can tap into our retirement fund if necessary. Education is the best investment." I stood frozen in the doorway, their words echoing in my ears. Education is the best investment. Just not my education, apparently. "Oh, Alex," my mother said, finally noticing me. "There's a plate for you in the microwave. We started without you since we weren't sure when your shift ended." I nodded mechanically, too stunned by their conversation to formulate a response. They would tap retirement savings for Megan's preferred school, but couldn't help me attend. Westlake, despite my scholarship? Later that night, I sat at my desk. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Staring at my meticulous budget spreadsheet. At my current pace, it would take years to save enough for Westlake, and by then, the opportunity would be gone. Community college was fine for fundamentals, but it lacked the advanced programs and connections I needed. My laptop screen showed an email I'd received earlier that day from Westlake's admissions office. "We hope to see you next fall. Please let us know if financial circumstances are affecting your decision to defer enrollment." It was as if the universe was nudging me toward a decision I had been avoiding. Continuing on my current path meant accepting my parents' assessment of my potential. It meant watching Megan receive opportunity after opportunity while I scraped by on practical options. I opened a new document and began typing a business plan. Not for some distant future, but for now. I would not wait 5 years. I would start building immediately, even if that meant taking risks I had previously avoided. "If no one will invest in me," I whispered to my empty room, "then I'll invest in myself." My plan required precision, discipline, and secrecy. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I knew my family would discourage any deviation from the practical path they'd assigned me. The first stage involved leveraging my position at Lakeside Coffee House, which served as a hub for local professionals. Instead of just serving their coffee, I began engaging them in conversations about their businesses. "Your Instagram looks great," I told Mr. Chen, who owned a local boutique. "But have you considered using targeted ads to reach more customers? Like the women who bought those new scarves yesterday?" At first, he seemed surprised that his barista was discussing digital marketing strategies. But after I showed him a mock campaign I'd created for his store, developed during my break using free online tools, his surprise turned to interest. "You know," he said, studying my sample, "we've been thinking about hiring someone for this, but agencies are so expensive." I took a deep breath. "I could do it for half what an agency would charge. I'll guarantee results, or you don't pay." That afternoon, I secured my first client. While continuing my classes, I began building a client base among Lakeside's small business community. I operated under the business name Horizon Digital and created a professional website showcasing my services. My bedroom became my office after coffee shop shifts and on weekends. Professor Harrison became my unofficial mentor, reviewing my contracts and providing guidance when I encountered challenges. "You're essentially getting paid to build your portfolio and expertise," he observed. Very clever approach. By the end of my first year at community college, I was managing social media and digital marketing for 8 local businesses. My grades remained excellent, but increasingly, my real education was happening after class hours. At home, I kept my growing business quiet. My parents assumed my late nights were spent studying or working extra coffee shop shifts. They rarely asked about my life anyway, their attention consumed by Megan's medical school preparations. When they commented on my growing savings account, I simply said I was being practical about my future, a phrase that always ended their curiosity. In reality, I was executing the second phase of my plan, building systems that would allow my business to scale. I developed templates, workflows, and measurement tools that streamlined my process. I hired 2 classmates part-time to help with content creation and basic account management. By the middle of my second year at Lakeside Community College, Horizon Digital was generating more monthly revenue than my previous annual salary at the coffee shop. I had moved from basic social media management to comprehensive digital marketing. Strategies and word was spreading beyond our small suburb. The real breakthrough came when Samantha Chen, no relation to the boutique owner, a marketing director at Horizon Technologies in Boston, reached out after seeing my work for her brother's restaurant. "We need this kind of results-oriented approach for our small and mid-sized clients," she said during our video call. "Would you be interested in a consulting arrangement?" Horizon Technologies, a mid-sized software company with an established marketing department, wanted my expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents were still viewing me as someone who should stick to practical community college, professionals in my field were beginning to recognize my value. The consulting agreement with Horizon Technologies marked the beginning of Phase 3, expansion beyond Lakeside. I was no longer just Alex Wilson, the overlooked sibling. I was becoming Alex Wilson, the founder of a growing digital marketing consultancy with clients in 3 states. All while my family remained completely unaware. Success rarely follows a smooth trajectory, and my path was no exception. As Horizon Digital grew, so did the complexities and challenges I faced. The first major hurdle came when my largest local client, faced with financial difficulties, paid their invoice 2 months late. The cash flow disruption forced me to dip into my tuition savings, the very money I'd been accumulating to eventually transfer to Westlake. That same week, Megan called with exciting news. "Mom and Dad are helping me put a deposit on an apartment in Boston," she gushed. "It's close to the medical school and in a really nice area. You should see the hardwood floors, Alex." I gripped my phone tighter. "That's great, Megan. I'm happy for you." "They're so generous," she continued, oblivious to my strained tone. "Dad says they want me to focus on my studies without worrying about working part-time like some students have to." After we hung up, I stared at my depleted savings account and the stack of pending invoices. The contrast between our situations couldn't have been clearer. Another investment in Megan's future, while I faced my challenges alone. But instead of discouraging me, this realization hardened my resolve. I implemented stricter payment terms with new clients and created an emergency fund to buffer against future cash flow issues. The second major challenge emerged as I attempted to balance my growing business with my studies. Despite my best efforts, my perfect GPA slipped to a 3.7 after I missed several assignment deadlines during a particularly intense project for Horizon Technologies. Professor Harrison noticed my exhaustion one evening after class. "You're overextending yourself," he observed. "Something has to give, Alex." "I can't slow down," I insisted. "I need to build enough momentum before..." "Before what?" He pressed. I hesitated, then admitted the truth. "Before I make my move to Boston." His eyebrows rose. "Boston? Not Westlake?" "Plans change," I replied. "The connections I need are in Boston now, not at Westlake. Horizon Technologies has hinted at a more permanent arrangement, and several of their clients have expressed interest in working with me directly." Professor Harrison studied me for a moment. "You're making decisions based on business strategy, rather than family expectations or even your original educational goals. That's actually quite sophisticated thinking." His validation meant more than he could know. The third and perhaps most difficult challenge was internal: doubt. Despite my growing success, I sometimes questioned whether I was making the right choices. Was I abandoning my education for business too soon? Was I motivated by genuine ambition, or just the desire to prove my parents wrong? These questions haunted me late at night as I worked on client projects or refined my business model. The weight of making these decisions entirely alone sometimes felt crushing. During one such moment of doubt, I received an unexpected email from Samantha at Horizon Technologies. Our management team was impressed with your last presentation. We'd like to discuss a potential director position in our SMB division. Would require relocation to Boston. It was the validation I needed. At exactly the right moment. Not just a consulting gig, but a director position, at 21, with only an associate's degree. The email confirmed what I had begun to suspect. In the digital marketing world, results and innovation often mattered more than traditional credentials. As I drafted my response to Samantha, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Helping Megan shop for furniture this weekend. Please water the plants while we're gone. The juxtaposition was so perfect it made me laugh out loud. While they were furnishing Megan's Boston apartment, I was considering a job offer that would take me to the same city. But they didn't even know enough about my life to realize it. I decided then that I wouldn't tell them about the opportunity or my plans. Not yet. There would be a better moment, when I was ready to reveal not just one achievement, but the entire truth of what I'd been building while they weren't paying attention. The trajectory of my journey shifted significantly, thanks to one person who saw my potential when my own family didn't. Professor Jack Harrison. More than just a community college instructor, he became the mentor and ally I desperately needed. Unlike my parents, who viewed community college as my ceiling, Professor Harrison saw it as merely my starting point. During one of our weekly meetings, he pushed me to think beyond my current success. Horizon Digital is impressive, he acknowledged, but I sense you're playing it safe in some ways. You're thinking too small. His observation caught me off guard. I have clients in 3 states and a potential job offer in Boston. How is that small? Because you're still defining success within the boundaries others have set for you, he explained. You're proving you can do well despite your parents' lack of support, despite starting at community college, despite being only 21. I'm challenging you to define success on your own terms, without the despite. His words resonated more deeply than I wanted to admit. Was I still allowing my family's perception to limit my ambitions? When I mentioned Horizon Technology's job offer, Professor Harrison's response surprised me. It's a good opportunity, he said carefully. But I wonder if it's the right one for you. What do you mean? You've built something remarkable with Horizon Digital. Taking a corporate position might feel like validation, but it could also derail what you've created. The salary would be 3 times what I'm making now, I countered. He smiled knowingly. And is that why you started this journey? For a salary? Again, he had cut to the heart of my internal conflict. The truth was, I had created Horizon Digital not just as a revenue stream, but as an expression of my approach to business, results-driven, innovative, and accessible to clients, traditionally overlooked by larger agencies. Our conversation shifted my perspective. Instead of viewing the Horizon Technologies offer as the culmination of my efforts, I began seeing it as just one option in a broader strategy. Professor Harrison helped me draft a counterproposal. I would create a specialized division for small business clients under the Horizon Technologies umbrella, operating semi-autonomously as a strategic partner rather than as an employee. This arrangement would allow me to maintain Horizon Digital while leveraging Horizon Technologies' resources and client base. They might say no, he warned. It's an unusual structure. Then I continue on my current path, I replied with newfound clarity. Either way, I'm making choices based on what I want to build, not what I'm trying to prove. 2 weeks later, Samantha called with Horizon Technologies' response. They were intrigued by my proposal and wanted to discuss details in person, in Boston. As I prepared for the trip, Professor Harrison offered one final piece of advice that would prove invaluable. When you're in Boston, he said, visit 3 small businesses similar to your current clients. Talk to them about their marketing challenges. Get a feel for the market before you commit to anything. This suggestion led me to Taylor Rodriguez, owner of a struggling craft brewery whose online presence failed to capture the unique character of their products. Our scheduled 30-minute conversation stretched to 3 hours as we discovered a shared vision for authentic digital storytelling. "Where has your approach been all this time?" Taylor exclaimed. "We've consulted with 3 different agencies, and none of them understood what makes us different." By the end of our meeting, not only had I secured a new client, but Taylor had introduced me to 2 other small business owners facing similar challenges. My Boston network was forming before I'd even decided to move there. These connections proved crucial when I met with Horizon Technologies' management team. Rather than appearing as a young consultant eager for corporate validation, I arrived as a business owner with a growing Boston client base and a clear vision for partnership. The resulting agreement exceeded my original proposal. Horizon Digital would become a strategic partner with Horizon Technologies, maintaining its brand identity while gaining access to larger clients and resources. I would split my time between my own growing client roster and selected Horizon Technologies projects. When I called Professor Harrison with the news, his response was characteristically thoughtful. "You've created an opportunity that honors your vision rather than compromising it," he said. "That's rare at any age, but especially at 21. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance," I admitted. "No, Alex," he corrected gently. "I provided perspective, but you built this. Don't diminish that achievement by assigning credit elsewhere. That's the kind of thinking that allowed your family to overlook your potential for so long." His words struck a chord. For years, I had internalized my family's perception, believing, on some level, that I was indeed less deserving of investment and attention than my sister. Professor Harrison had helped me recognize and begin dismantling that destructive belief. As I prepared for my move to Boston, I sent him a custom-engraved plaque to the person who saw the forest when everyone else was counting trees. The 6 months following my move to Boston transformed both my business and my perspective. Horizon Digital expanded rapidly, growing from a 1-person operation to a team of 7. We secured office space in a renovated industrial building. Nothing fancy, but distinctly ours. Our partnership with Horizon Technologies opened doors to larger clients, while our reputation for innovative strategies for small businesses continued to spread through word of mouth. The dual approach created a unique market position that larger agencies couldn't easily replicate. Meanwhile, back in Lakeside, my family remained remarkably uninformed about my life. Our communications had dwindled to occasional text messages and obligatory holiday calls. They knew I had moved to Boston for work, but showed little curiosity about the details. "Alex has some marketing job in Boston now," I overheard my mother telling a neighbor during my brief Christmas visit home. Her tone suggested it was a minor administrative role, hardly worth elaborating on. I didn't correct her. The gap between their perception and my reality had grown so vast that any explanation would have seemed like boasting. Megan, now in her 2nd year of medical school, remained the focal point of family conversations. Her studies, her apartment, her future, these topics dominated every discussion. "Medical school is just so demanding," my mother sighed during dinner. "We're helping with her rent so she doesn't need to work part-time. It's tight financially, but education is an investment." I took a sip of water to hide my expression. Education is an investment. The familiar refrain that had never applied to me. "How's your job going?" my father asked, making a perfunctory effort to include me in the conversation. "It's going well," I replied simply. "I'm staying busy." He nodded, clearly satisfied with this minimal exchange, before turning back to Megan. "Tell Alex about the research opportunity your professor mentioned." As Megan launched into a detailed account of her academic prospects, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Their approval, which I had craved for so long, suddenly seemed inconsequential compared to what I was building in Boston. I returned to Boston energized rather than dejected. For the first time, I recognized my family's limited perception as their loss, not mine. The new year brought unexpected developments. A profile of rising marketing innovators in a prominent industry publication featured Horizon Digital, highlighting our unique approach to small business clients. The exposure led to a flood of inquiries, forcing us to develop more structured onboarding processes and expand our team further. Samantha from Horizon Technologies noticed the change. "You're not just growing," she observed during one of our strategy sessions. "You're evolving." She was right. What had begun as a one-person consultancy was developing into a cohesive agency, with specialized departments and defined methodologies. We were no longer just executing marketing tactics. We were creating proprietary approaches based on our accumulated data and experience. The industry began to take notice. Invitations to speak at conferences arrived. Larger competitors started mimicking our small business strategies. A tech magazine listed me among 30 under 30 entrepreneurs changing their industries. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my family about my professional achievements. Not out of spite, but because the right moment hadn't yet arrived. I wanted them to see not just a single accomplishment, but the complete picture of what I'd built without their support or knowledge. That moment approached faster than expected when Horizon Digital was nominated for a prestigious industry award. Most Innovative Marketing Agency, Small Business category. The awards ceremony would be held in Boston, with significant media coverage expected. The same week as the nomination announcement, I received a text from my mother. "Dad's 50th birthday next month. Planning small family dinner. Hope you can make it back to Lakeside for the weekend." The timing was perfect. The awards ceremony was scheduled for Friday evening. My father's birthday dinner would be Saturday. I would attend both, but my family would learn about the first only after it had occurred. "Are you sure about this approach?" Taylor asked when I explained my plan. "Wouldn't it be more satisfying to invite them to the ceremony? See their reaction in real time?" I shook my head. This isn't about their reaction. It's about them. Seeing the complete reality I've built, not just a single evening of recognition. The truth was more complex than I articulated to Taylor. Part of me worried that inviting them to the ceremony would somehow diminish it, that their presence would reactivate old patterns and insecurities at a moment that should represent my independence from those very dynamics. The awards ceremony arrived, and against strong competition, Horizon Digital won our category. Standing on stage, accepting recognition from industry leaders who had evaluated our work strictly on its merits, I felt a profound sense of validation that had nothing to do with family approval. The next morning, I boarded a train to Lakeside. The award carefully packed in my luggage alongside a portfolio documenting Horizon Digital's growth and achievements. After years of operating in parallel worlds, it was time for those worlds to collide. I arrived at my parents' house in Lakeside on Saturday afternoon, several hours before my father's birthday dinner. The familiar driveway now held Megan's Honda Civic, showing signs of age and casual neglect, and my parents' sensible sedan. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell rather than using my old key, a small but deliberate choice that positioned me as a visitor rather than a returning child. My mother opened the door, surprise registering on her face. "Alex, you're early. We weren't expecting you until dinner time." "I thought we could catch up beforehand," I replied, wheeling my small suitcase into the entryway. The house looked exactly as I remembered, down to the prominently displayed photos of Megan's graduation and white coat ceremony. My own college graduation, from Lakeside Community College, was represented by a small frame on a side table. My father emerged from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose. "There's the Bostonian," he said, offering a brief hug. "How was the trip?" "Good," I said. "Productive, actually. I finished some work on the train." "Always the diligent one," my mother commented, heading toward the kitchen. "I'm just making some coffee. Megan should be back from her run soon." We gathered in the living room, exchanging safe, superficial updates. They asked generic questions about work and life in Boston, clearly expecting equally generic responses. I provided them, biding my time. When Megan arrived, freshly showered after her run, the family dynamic shifted immediately. Her animated descriptions of medical school challenges captured our parents' full attention and concern. "The workload is just incredible," she explained dramatically. "I barely sleep some weeks, but Dad's right. It will all be worth it in the end." My father nodded proudly. Any worthwhile achievement requires sacrifice. The irony of his statement, coming from a man who had refused to sacrifice for my education, was not lost on me. As the conversation continued to revolve around Megan's experiences, I excused myself to retrieve something from my suitcase. I returned with a glossy industry magazine open to the 30 under 30 feature, my photo and profile clearly visible. "I thought you might be interested in this," I said casually, placing it on the coffee table. The conversation halted as they registered what they were seeing. My mother picked up the magazine, adjusting her reading glasses. "Alex Wilson, 23, founder and CEO of Horizon Digital," she read aloud. "Revolutionizing how small businesses approach digital marketing." Her voice trailed off as she continued reading silently. My father leaned over to see the page. "CEO? I thought you worked for a marketing company in Boston." "I own a marketing company in Boston," I corrected him. "Horizon Digital. We have 14 employees now, with clients across the Northeast and expanding nationally through our partnership with Horizon Technologies." The silence that followed was profound. Megan reached for the magazine, scanning the article with furrowed brows. "I don't understand," my mother finally said. "Why haven't you told us about this?" Rather than answering directly, I retrieved my portfolio and the award from my suitcase. I placed the gleaming trophy on the coffee table between us. "This was presented last night," I explained. "Most innovative marketing agency in our category. National recognition." My father stared at the award, then back at me. "You won this? Your company won this?" I nodded. "The company I built while working full-time at a coffee shop. The company I started when I couldn't afford to attend Westlake. Because my college fund wasn't considered a worthwhile investment, unlike Megan's car." The reference to their past decision hung in the air, impossible to ignore. "That's not fair, Alex," my mother protested weakly. "We made the best decisions we could with limited resources. Megan needed—" "This isn't about what Megan needed," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "This is about what you never saw in me. The potential, the determination, the vision." I opened the portfolio, showing them page after page documenting Horizon Digital's growth. Our client list, press coverage, revenue charts, office photos, team expansion. While you were furnishing Megan's apartment in Boston, I was signing the lease on our first office space there. While you were telling neighbors about my marketing job, I was being interviewed by business publications. I built all of this without a single dollar of support or a word of encouragement from either of you. My father's face had turned an unusual shade of pale. "Why are you telling us this now? To make us feel guilty?" I shook my head. "I'm telling you now because it's time for you to see me clearly. Not as the practical, self-sufficient child who needed less attention. not as the reasonable one who could be denied opportunities, but as someone who succeeded not despite your lack of investment, but completely independent of it. Megan, uncharacteristically quiet until now, finally spoke. "This is incredible, Alex. I had no idea." Her tone held genuine admiration, without the competitive edge I might have expected. Turning to her, I softened slightly. "How could you know? None of you ever asked." We sat in uncomfortable silence as they processed this revelation. Years of assumptions about me, about my capabilities, ambitions, and worth, were crumbling before their eyes. My mother reached for the portfolio, examining the client testimonials and press clippings more carefully. "All those late nights we thought you were studying. You were building a business?" "Yes," I confirmed. "From my bedroom, then from a tiny apartment, and now from our offices in downtown Boston." "But why the secrecy?" my father pressed. "Why not tell us as it was happening?" The question was fair, and I considered it carefully before responding. "Because I needed to do this without your voices in my head," I finally answered. "Without your doubts or your practical concerns or your comparisons to Megan's path. I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms." As I spoke these words, I realized they were entirely true. The secrecy hadn't been solely about revealing the finished product to maximize impact. It had been about protecting my vision during its vulnerable early stages, about creating space where my confidence could grow untainted by their limited perception of me. "I would have helped if you'd asked," my father said, a defensive edge to his voice. "Would you?" I questioned gently. "When I asked for help with Westlake tuition, you told me business degrees were a dime a dozen. You didn't see value in my path then. Why would you have seen it later?" He had no response to this, his gaze dropping to the award still sitting on the table between us. My mother's eyes had begun to glisten with unshed tears. She reached across the coffee table to touch my hand, but I subtly shifted, not yet ready for reconciliation. "We always knew you were capable," she said softly. "You've always been so independent." "Capable isn't the same as exceptional," I replied. "And my independence wasn't innate. It was necessary. I became self-sufficient because I recognized early on that support wasn't distributed equally in this family." The statement hung in the air, its truth too evident to deny. Even now, surrounded by evidence of my success, they seemed unable to fully process the magnitude of what I had accomplished, or their role in failing to nurture it. Megan, surprisingly, broke the tension. "I never realized," she said, her usual confidence subdued. "I always thought you were content with community college and local jobs. You never complained." I turned to her with a sad smile. "Why would I complain to people who had already decided my limitations? Who had already designated me as the practical one, the reasonable one who would understand why the family resources went elsewhere?" The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, announcing the approaching dinner reservation. No one moved. "Perhaps we should reschedule dinner," my father suggested, still staring at the award. "This conversation seems more important." His willingness to postpone his own birthday celebration indicated the first real shift in his perception, the first acknowledgement that something significant had occurred beyond his awareness. "No," I said, closing the portfolio. "We'll continue this tomorrow. Tonight is still about your birthday." As we prepared to leave for the restaurant, I noticed my parents exchanging glances, silently communicating in that shorthand developed over decades of marriage. They seemed disoriented, struggling to integrate this new information into their long-held narrative about their children. The birthday dinner proceeded with a strange undercurrent. Superficial conversations about local news and distant relatives filled the awkward silence, but the revelation of my success remained palpable, an invisible guest at the table. When the waiter brought my father's dessert with a candle, He made a show of closing his eyes to make a wish before blowing it out. When he opened them again, he looked directly at me. "I wished for a chance to understand my son better," he said, breaking the tradition of keeping wishes secret. "It seems I've missed quite a lot." It was a small gesture, but significant coming from a man who rarely admitted error or vulnerability. I nodded in acknowledgement, neither accepting nor rejecting the implicit request for a fresh start. When we returned home, I declined their invitation to continue our conversation, citing travel fatigue. The truth was more complex. I needed time to process the impact of my revelation and prepare for the deeper discussion that would follow. In my childhood bedroom, now converted to a generic guest room with no trace of my earlier life, I reviewed emails from my team and sent a brief update about the award ceremony to Professor Harrison. His response came quickly. "Remember, this homecoming isn't about vindication but clarity. You've already succeeded by your own metrics. Anything else is supplemental." His wisdom, as always, helped me calibrate my expectations. I hadn't returned to Lakeside seeking my parents' approval or even their pride. Those ships had sailed years ago. What I sought was recognition of the reality I had created, acknowledgement of the flawed assumptions that had shaped our family dynamic, and perhaps a more honest relationship moving forward. The next morning, I found my father alone in the kitchen, methodically preparing coffee with the precision he applied to all tasks. "You're up early," he observed, setting a mug before me without asking if I wanted one. "Work habits," I replied, accepting the coffee. "Even on Sundays." He nodded, then surprised me by asking, "What's your average day like now? Running your company?" It was the first genuine question about my professional life he had ever asked. The sincerity in his tone suggested he actually wanted to know the answer. For the next hour, I described the rhythms and responsibilities of my position: strategy sessions with clients, mentoring my growing team, analyzing campaign metrics, projecting growth, negotiating partnerships. He listened with unexpected attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his business acumen, an aspect of himself he had never before shared with me. "You've created something remarkable," he finally said, staring into his now empty mug. "Not just financially successful, but structurally sound. Your business model has real sustainability." Coming from my risk-averse father, this assessment represented high praise. I felt an unexpected warmth at his professional recognition, distinct from the parental approval I had once craved. "I learned a lot at community college," I said, extending a small olive branch. "Professor Harrison was an exceptional mentor." "The one who wrote your recommendation letter," he recalled, surprising me with this detail from years ago. "He saw something in you." "He paid attention," I corrected gently. "He asked questions about my goals and actually listened to the answers." My father absorbed this implicit criticism without defensiveness. "I should have done the same," he admitted after a long pause. "I made assumptions based on incomplete information." It wasn't quite an apology, but it represented more self-reflection than I had ever witnessed from him. Before I could respond, my mother and Megan joined us, bringing their own coffee cups and hesitant smiles. "We were hoping to continue yesterday's conversation," my mother said, taking a seat at the kitchen table. "If you're willing." I studied their expressions, my mother's hopeful anxiety, my father's contemplative stillness, Megan's uncharacteristic uncertainty. They were genuinely trying to understand, to recalibrate their perception of me and our family dynamic. "What would you like to know?" I asked. What followed was the most honest conversation our family had ever experienced. My mother asked about the early days of my business, expressing genuine surprise at the strategic planning that had gone into it. "You've always been so methodical," she observed, "even as a child. I suppose we mistook that for caution rather than calculated preparation." Megan wanted to know more about our clients and services, displaying a curiosity about my work that had never before been part of our relationship. "It sounds incredibly creative," she said with genuine admiration. "Completely different from medicine, obviously, but similarly complex in its own way." My father, however, asked the most penetrating question. "Do you think we failed you, Alex?" The directness of his query silenced the room. Megan looked uncomfortable, while my mother seemed to brace herself for my response. I considered deflecting, offering reassurance to ease their evident guilt. But that would merely continue the pattern of emotional management I had practiced throughout my childhood, prioritizing their comfort over honest expression. "Yes," I finally answered. "Not through malice or even neglect, but through fundamental misperception. You labeled me early, the practical one, the independent one, the one who needed less, and then interpreted all my actions through that lens. Even my achievements were framed as confirmations of those labels rather than indications that the labels themselves were inadequate." My mother flinched slightly at the assessment, but my father nodded slowly, absorbing the criticism. "When I showed interest in business and entrepreneurship," I continued, "you viewed it as an impractical dream rather than a legitimate aspiration. When I worked multiple jobs, you saw responsible behavior rather than determined preparation for something bigger. You never asked why I was reading business journals at 17, or taking free online courses in digital marketing, or meticulously tracking my savings. Because we assumed we knew you," my mother interjected softly. "We thought we understood your motivations." "That's exactly the point," I agreed. "You thought you knew, so you never needed to ask. And in not asking, you missed who I actually am." Megan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. "I played a role in this too," she admitted. "I accepted the resources and attention without questioning the imbalance. I benefited from being the special one without considering what that designation cost you." Her self-awareness surprised me. In my narrative of our family dynamic, Megan had always been a willing participant in, if not an architect of, the unequal distribution of support and recognition. Her acknowledgement of this role represented a maturity I hadn't anticipated. "We can't change the past," my father said pragmatically, "but perhaps we can approach the future differently, with more awareness." It was a reasonable suggestion, typical of his problem-solving mindset. Yet it also revealed how much he still didn't understand about the emotional impact of their choices. "It's not just about doing better moving forward," I explained. "It's about recognizing what was lost. I built my success without your guidance or support. I figured out college financing, business development, and professional networking entirely on my own. Those could have been shared experiences, opportunities for connection and mutual growth that we'll never recover." My mother wiped away a tear. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished, Alex, despite our failures." "I didn't do it despite you," I corrected her. "And I didn't do it to prove something to you. I did it for myself, because this is who I always was, whether you recognized it or not." This distinction seemed important, not just for them to understand, but for my own continued growth. My success had evolved beyond reaction to rejection. It had become a pure expression of my capabilities and vision. As the conversation continued through the morning and into the afternoon, layers of misunderstanding and missed connections were gradually excavated. My parents shared their own constraints and fears, financial pressures I hadn't fully appreciated, concerns about Megan's academic struggles that had been hidden from me, their own limited understanding of modern business, dynamics that had made my ambitions seem unrealistic to them. None of these explanations excused the fundamental inequity of their parenting, but they provided context that softened my resentment slightly. They had been operating from their own limited perspectives, making flawed decisions based on incomplete information and unconscious biases. By late afternoon, emotional exhaustion had set in. We had achieved more honest communication in one day than in the previous 23 years combined. It wasn't resolution or reconciliation. Those would require time and consistent effort, but it was a beginning. As I prepared to return to Boston that evening, my father approached me with an unexpected request. "I'd like to see it," he said. "Your company, your offices in Boston, if that would be acceptable to you." The hesitancy in his voice, the acknowledgement that he had no automatic right to this aspect of my life, represented a fundamental shift in our relationship dynamic. "We could arrange that," I replied cautiously. "Perhaps next month, after the new expansion is complete." He nodded, accepting both the invitation and its boundaries. "I'd like that. I'd like to understand what you've built." My mother, overhearing this exchange, added her own careful request. "Maybe we could meet some of your team, the people you work with?" Their interest felt genuine rather than performative, a true desire to know the life I had created beyond their limited conception of who I was. "We'll see," I said, neither promising nor refusing. It would depend on timing and workflow. As I waited for my rideshare to the train station, Megan followed me onto the front porch, away from our parents' ears. "I never thanked you," she said abruptly. "For what?" "For never resenting me directly," she explained. "You could have hated me for the inequity, made my life difficult in 1,000 small ways. Many siblings would have, but you never did." I considered this observation. It was true that my frustration had been directed primarily at our parents' choices rather than at Megan herself. I had recognized, even as a teenager, that she was merely accepting the advantages offered to her, as most people would. Resentment would have been wasted energy, I explained. I needed all my focus for building something, not tearing something down. She nodded thoughtfully. Still, I benefited from an unfair system. I'm only now beginning to recognize how much was handed to me that you had to fight for. Medical school is challenging, but I've never questioned whether I belong there or whether I'm capable. That confidence comes partly from having always been told I was special, deserving, worth investing in. Her self-awareness was evolving. In real time, her perspective expanding beyond the narrow frame she had occupied in our family narrative. "What will you do with that recognition?" I asked, genuinely curious about how this new understanding might influence her. She considered the question seriously. "I'm not sure yet, but I want to be more conscious of the advantages I've received, less entitled, more grateful, and maybe find ways to support others who don't have the same built-in confidence and backing." It was a thoughtful response, suggesting that our family's recalibration might benefit Megan's development as much as it acknowledged my achievements. My rideshare arrived, ending our conversation at this promising juncture. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, my family gathered on the porch. A tableau so familiar yet fundamentally altered by the revelations and conversations of the past 24 hours. "We'll talk soon," my father called, the phrase transformed, from casual dismissal to actual commitment. I nodded, accepting the promise at face value while maintaining healthy skepticism about its fulfillment. Real change would require sustained effort and consistent awareness, qualities our family had not previously demonstrated in our relationships with each other. On the train back to Boston, I reflected on the weekend's events. The revelation of my success had forced my family to confront their limited perception of me, but it had also challenged my own narrative about them. I had cast them as consistently dismissive and uninterested, but the reality contained more nuance, moments of attention I had overlooked, constraints I hadn't fully appreciated, perspectives I had simplified for the sake of emotional self-protection. This realization didn't excuse the fundamental imbalance in how they had treated their children, but it suggested that the path forward might include more mutual understanding than I had previously imagined possible. By the time the train reached Boston, my focus had already shifted back to Horizon Digital, Our award had generated significant interest from potential clients and partners, creating both opportunities and challenges that would require immediate attention. The next morning, striding into our office, I was greeted by congratulatory smiles and excited updates from my team. The award had boosted morale and external interest exactly as we had hoped. Taylor met me at my office door, coffee in hand. "How was the family revelation?" she asked once we were alone. "As satisfying as you anticipated?" I considered the question. "Different," I finally answered. "Less about vindication and more about clarification for all of us." She studied me thoughtfully. "You seem changed by it, more centered somehow." Her observation resonated with my own sense that something fundamental had shifted. The weekend had represented not just my family's recognition of my success, but my own liberation from the need for that recognition. I had confronted the disparity in how they had treated their children and forced them to acknowledge it. But in doing so, I had also released myself from its emotional hold. "I think I finally understood something important," I explained. "Their limited perception of me was never about my actual capabilities or potential. It was about their own limitations, their biases, fears, assumptions. I spent years trying to prove my worth to people who weren't equipped to recognize it." Taylor nodded. "That's a powerful realization." "The irony," I continued, "is that their underestimation became a kind of backwards advantage. Because they expected so little, I operated completely below their radar. I built something substantial without pressure, without interference, without having to justify my choices or methods. Freedom through invisibility," Taylor summarized. "Exactly. Not the path I would have chosen, but one that ultimately served me well." Our conversation was interrupted by Samantha from Horizon Technologies, calling to discuss a major potential client who had reached out after seeing our award announcement. The business of building continued, unaffected by the personal revelations of the weekend. Over the weeks that followed, my communication with my family cautiously increased. My father sent articles related to digital marketing trends, small attempts to engage with my professional world. My mother called more regularly, asking specific questions about my work and life in Boston rather than offering generic inquiries. Even Megan reached out occasionally, sharing challenges from medical school without the assumption that her experiences were inherently more significant than mine. These were small shifts, but they represented effort, an attempt to see me more clearly and engage more authentically. I responded with measured openness, neither rushing toward reconciliation nor rejecting their overtures. A month after my revelatory visit home, my parents came to Boston as planned. I arranged for them to visit our offices during a relatively quiet afternoon, giving them a tour of the space and introducing them to key team members. My father studied everything with analytical interest: our workflow systems, our client management, software, our campaign metrics dashboards. He asked intelligent questions that revealed his business acumen, an aspect of himself he had rarely shared with me. "This is impressively organized," he commented, reviewing our project management system. "More sophisticated than what we use at Meridian, honestly." My mother seemed more interested in the interpersonal dynamics, noting how the team interacted with me and with each other. "They respect you," she observed quietly as we watched a strategy session in progress. "Not just as the boss, but as a mentor." Their observations reflected their different values and perspectives, but both contained genuine appreciation for what I had built. Neither attempted to take credit or suggest they had somehow contributed to my success, a restraint that indicated real growth in their understanding. As we wrapped up the office tour, I noticed my father lingering by the wall where we displayed our company timeline, photos and milestones marking Horizon Digital's growth from one-person consultancy to thriving agency. "You did all this while we thought you were just..." His voice trailed off. "Just what, Dad?" I prompted. He sighed heavily. Just settling. Just taking the practical route because you couldn't afford better options. He turned to face me fully. We were wrong. Completely wrong. The admission hung in the air between us. Simple, direct, unqualified by excuses. I had waited years to hear those words, but now that they were spoken, I realized something unexpected. Their validation no longer held the power I once thought it would. Yes, you were wrong, I agreed calmly. But that's not what matters anymore. My mother joined us, her expression confused. What do you mean, Alex? I gestured toward the busy office floor visible through the glass walls of the conference room. What matters is what I built because of that misperception. If you had funded my Westlake tuition instead of Megan's car, I might have followed a completely conventional path. Degree, entry-level corporate job, slow climb up someone else's ladder. My father frowned. You can't know that. No, I acknowledged. But I know this. Being underestimated gave me freedom. Freedom to experiment, to fail without expectations, to build something authentic without interference or judgment. I met their eyes directly. Your lack of investment in my future became my greatest advantage. It was a realization that had been forming gradually over the past year. The understanding that my family's dismissal, though painful and unfair, had inadvertently created the conditions for my most meaningful growth. Being overlooked had allowed me to develop on my own terms, following my own vision rather than seeking external validation. That doesn't excuse what we did, my mother said softly. No, I agreed. It doesn't. The inequity was real, and it hurt. But I'm not interested in continuing to measure my life against that pain. I've built something I'm proud of. Something that represents who I really am, rather than who anyone else expected me to be. My father studied me with new awareness. You've become much more than we ever imagined possible. That's exactly the point, I replied. Your imagination, or lack of it, doesn't define my potential. It never did. This conversation continued, over dinner at a restaurant near the office. Not the expensive venue I had initially planned, but a casual neighborhood place where my team often gathered after work. The choice felt right, authentic rather than performative, reflecting my actual life rather than some version crafted to impress them. Over pasta and wine, my father asked about the future of Horizon Digital, exhibiting genuine interest in my vision for the company's growth. We're considering opening a third office in Chicago, I explained. The Midwest market has potential we haven't fully tapped yet. Ambitious expansion, he observed. Do you have the capital structure to support that? It was the kind of practical business question he might have asked a colleague, respectful of the complexity involved, assuming competence rather than questioning it. Our conversation shifted into a detailed discussion of growth strategy, financing options, and market analysis. For perhaps the first time, we were engaging as fellow professionals rather than parent and child. My mother, watching this exchange, with evident fascination, eventually interjected, "I've never heard you discuss business this way before, Robert." My father looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "You're talking to Alex like a respected peer, not a child needing guidance." "It's different." Her observation highlighted the fundamental shift occurring in our relationship, a recalibration based on present reality rather than past assumptions. "I suppose I am," my father acknowledged. He turned to me with unexpected candor. "The truth is, you've accomplished things I never had the courage to attempt. I stayed at Meridian for 20 years, accepting modest promotions, never taking real risks. You've built something from nothing in just a few years." His admission stunned me. Throughout my childhood, my father had projected unshakable confidence in his professional judgments. The revelation of his own doubts and regrets added dimension to a man I had viewed in much simpler terms. Why did you stay so long at Meridian? I asked, genuinely curious now about choices I had never thought to question. He considered the question seriously. Security, mainly. Fear of failure. Concern about providing reliable income for the family. He glanced at my mother. We had certain expectations about what success should look like. Steady job, regular promotions, retirement package. Entrepreneurship seemed risky. It is risky, I acknowledged. But so is placing all your security in someone else's hands. I learned that when the company I was working for laid off half the marketing department without warning. My mother reached for her wine glass, her expression troubled. I think we projected our own fears onto you, Alex. When you talked about starting a business, we heard our own anxieties about financial instability. And when Megan chose medicine, I began. We saw guaranteed security, my father finished. A clear path with predictable outcomes. It aligned with our definition of success. The conversation had moved beyond recrimination into something more valuable, genuine understanding of the perspectives and fears that had shaped our family's dynamics. I wasn't excusing their unequal treatment of their children, but I was gaining insight into the complex factors that had influenced it. As we finished dinner, my mother asked the question I had been anticipating. Where do we go from here, Alex? Is there room for us in your life after everything that's happened? It was the central question, not about the past, but about the future we might build from this new understanding. I considered it carefully before responding. I'm not interested in performative reconciliation, I finally said. The kind where we pretend the past didn't happen, or that everything is suddenly perfect. What interests me is the possibility of an authentic relationship based on who we actually are now, not who you thought I was or who I needed you to be. What would that look like? My father asked. Honesty, respect for boundaries, recognition that the relationship will never be what it might have been if things had been different from the beginning. I paused, then added, and acceptance that I built my success independently, without your support or guidance. My mother nodded slowly. That seems fair. More than fair, my father agreed quietly. After dinner, as we walked back toward their hotel, my mother slipped her arm through mine, a gesture of affection she hadn't attempted in years. I'm sorry we missed so much, she said simply. So am I replied. But I'm not sorry about who I've become because of it. We parted with cautious plans for ongoing communication. Not rushed intimacy, but measured steps toward a more honest connection. As I watched them enter their hotel, I felt an unexpected lightness. The weight of seeking their approval or proving my worth had dissipated, replaced by the simple recognition that I had outgrown that need entirely. The following weekend, I visited Professor Harrison at his home in Lakeside, a monthly tradition we had maintained since my move to Boston. As we sat on his deck overlooking a small garden, I described my parents' visit and the conversations that had followed. They seemed to be making a genuine effort to understand, I concluded. He nodded thoughtfully. And how are you responding to that effort? With caution, I admitted. Part of me wants to embrace this new openness completely, but another part remembers all the years of being dismissed and undervalued. Both perspectives are valid, he observed. The question is which serves your growth moving forward. His framing shifted my thinking from reactive to strategic, from responding to past hurts to considering future possibilities. I've been defining myself in opposition to their perception for so long, I realized aloud. Even my success has been partly about proving them wrong. There's freedom in moving. Beyond that motivation, Professor Harrison smiled slightly. The most powerful transformation occurs when we shift from proving others wrong to expressing our authentic selves. Your journey began with the former, but has evolved into the latter. His insight resonated deeply. The anger and determination that had fueled my early efforts had gradually been replaced by genuine passion for the work itself, for building something meaningful that reflected my values and vision. I think I'm ready to relate to them as the person I've become, I said slowly, not as the child who needed their validation. That, he said with evident satisfaction, is the true measure of your success. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Megan. Her voice sounded tentative, lacking the confidence that had always characterized her interactions. "Mom and Dad told me about visiting your company," she began. "About seeing what you've built." "Yes," I replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. "I've been thinking about it a lot. About the car, the tuition, all of it." She paused, then continued with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I never questioned it back then. Why they would buy me an expensive car while telling you they couldn't afford your education. It seemed normal somehow, like I deserved it and you didn't." Her candor surprised me. Throughout our childhood, Megan had accepted preferential treatment as her due, never examining the inequity or her role in perpetuating it. "What's changed?" I asked. She sighed. "Perspective, I guess. Medical school has been humbling. For the first time, I'm not automatically the star, the one everyone expects to succeed. Some days, I'm barely keeping up. It's made me think about how much of my confidence came from always being told I was special, always being given whatever I needed to succeed." Her self-reflection impressed me. The entitled girl who had twirled her new car keys in our driveway was developing awareness of the advantages that had shaped her path. "The thing is," she continued, "I'm not sure who I am without all that support and validation. But you've always known exactly who you are, what you wanted to build, even when no one believed in it." That clarity came at a cost, I reminded her. "Years of being overlooked and underestimated." "I know," she acknowledged, "and I was part of that. I accepted their favoritism without ever questioning it. I'm sorry, Alex, truly." Her apology felt genuine, not performative remorse, but honest. Recognition of her role in our family's dysfunctional patterns. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It matters." "I'd like to know you better," she said after a moment. "The real you, not the version of you I assumed existed based on how our parents treated you." Her request opened possibilities for a relationship we had never developed. One based on mutual respect rather than the hierarchical valuing that had characterized our childhood interactions. "I'd like that too," I said, surprised to find I meant it. In the months that followed, gradual shifts occurred in all my family relationships. My father began calling occasionally with business questions, seeking my perspective on challenges at work or consulting me about investment opportunities. My mother made efforts to understand my life in Boston, asking specific questions about my work and friends rather than offering generic inquiries. Megan and I established a tentative friendship, meeting for lunch when her medical school schedule brought her to Boston. Our conversations evolved from cautious small talk to more substantive exchanges about our professional challenges and personal growth. None of these relationships resembled what they might have been had our family dynamic been healthier from the beginning. There remained an undercurrent of awareness about the years of inequity and missed connections, but there was also genuine effort toward more authentic engagement based on who we had each become. The most unexpected development occurred 6 months after my parents' visit to Boston. My father called with news that Meridian Insurance was offering early retirement packages to employees over 50. "I'm considering accepting," he said, his voice reflecting uncharacteristic uncertainty. "But I'm not ready to stop working entirely." "Have you thought about what you'd like to do instead?" I asked. "Actually, yes." His tone shifted, containing a hint of enthusiasm I rarely heard from him. "I've been developing an idea for specialized insurance products for small businesses, the kind of coverage that's usually only available to larger companies. Meridian isn't interested. They're focused on individual policies and major corporate clients, but I think there's a real gap in the market. I recognized something in his description that surprised me: entrepreneurial thinking. My father, who had spent decades in corporate stability and had dismissed my business ambitions as impractical dreams, was considering creating something new. That sounds promising, I said carefully. Have you developed a business plan? I'm working on it, he replied. It's been years since I've done anything like this. I'm not sure I remember how to evaluate a new venture properly. The hesitation in his voice contained an unspoken question. After a moment, I offered what he couldn't quite ask for directly. I'd be happy to review it when you're ready, provide some feedback if that would be helpful. The relief in his response was palpable. I'd appreciate that, Alex. Very much. 2 weeks later, he sent a preliminary business plan for what he was calling Main Street Insurance Solutions. The concept was solid: specialized insurance products tailored specifically for small businesses, offered through a streamlined digital platform that reduced overhead and allowed for more competitive pricing. The plan contained flaws and gaps, particularly in the digital marketing strategy and technology implementation. But the core idea demonstrated genuine insight into an underserved market segment. More surprising was the evidence of real passion in his detailed descriptions of how these products would address specific challenges faced by small business owners. I sent back comprehensive feedback, highlighting both the strengths of his concept and the areas requiring further development. My response was professional and detailed, exactly what I would have provided to any business colleague seeking my perspective. His reply came quickly. Thank you for taking this seriously. Your feedback is more valuable than you know. The exchange marked another evolution in our relationship. My father seeking and respecting my professional expertise in an area where he had once dismissed my capabilities. More significantly, it revealed dimensions of him I had never recognized: creative thinking, willingness to take calculated risks, desire to build something meaningful in the latter stage of his career. Over the following months, as he refined his business concept and prepared for early retirement from Meridian, we established a regular rhythm of consultation. He would send updated projections or marketing questions. I would provide targeted feedback and occasional resource recommendations. One evening, during a video call to discuss his website development plans, he paused our business conversation to address something more personal. I've been thinking about patterns, he said abruptly, about how we repeat what we've experienced without even realizing it. What do you mean? I asked, though I suspected where the conversation was heading. My father never supported my ideas either, he explained, his voice reflective. When I was about your age, I wanted to start an independent insurance agency. Had a business plan, market research, everything. He told me it was impractical, that I should focus on my corporate career where the outcomes were predictable. This piece of family history had never been shared with me before. I had always assumed my father's risk-averse approach to career development reflected his natural inclinations rather than learned patterns. So you did what he advised, I observed. He nodded. Stayed at Meridian for 30 years. It wasn't a bad life. Stable income, decent benefits, comfortable retirement approaching. But there was always this question in the back of my mind. What if I had tried? What if I had built something of my own? And now? I prompted. Now I'm watching my child succeed at exactly what I was too afraid to attempt. He smiled faintly. There's pain in that recognition. Regret for my own choices. Remorse for how I projected those limitations onto you. But there's something else, too. What? Pride, he said simply. Not the possessive kind where I take credit for your achievements, but genuine admiration for what you've built through your own vision and determination, despite my lack of support, despite my active discouragement. His words contained no manipulation or expectation, just honest recognition of both his failures and his evolving perspective. Thank you for telling me that, I said, finding myself moved by his vulnerability. I can't change how I failed to support you then, he continued, but I can make different choices now, both in how I relate to you and in how I approach my own remaining working years. This conversation marked a turning point in my understanding of my father, and by extension, our family dynamics. What I had interpreted as simple favoritism or dismissal of my potential had deeper roots in his own unresolved disappointments and internalized limitations. This insight didn't excuse the inequity in how he had treated his children, but it provided context that made his behavior more comprehensible, less a personal rejection than the unconscious repetition of patterns established in his own childhood. When Main Street Insurance Solutions launched 6 months later, I attended the small celebration my parents hosted in Lakeside. The gathering included family friends, former colleagues, and a few potential business partners my father had cultivated during his preparation phase. Watching him describe his business concept to the assembled guests, I observed qualities I had never associated with him: genuine enthusiasm, creative thinking, willingness to embrace uncertainty in service of a vision. These same qualities had been present in me from an early age, qualities he had failed to recognize or nurture because they reminded him of paths not taken in his own life. As the evening progressed, my mother joined me where I stood observing the interactions. "He's different," she said quietly. "More alive somehow. I haven't seen him this engaged in years." "He's building something meaningful," I replied. "Something that expresses his values and vision rather than just fulfilling external expectations." She studied me thoughtfully. "You understand that experience intimately, don't you?" I nodded, recognizing the parallel between my journey and the one my father was now undertaking, albeit at very different life stages. "I've been thinking about what I said that day with Megan's car," she continued. "Only the best for our future, doctor." As if her path somehow deserved more investment than yours. She shook her head slowly. "I can see now how those casual comments reinforced the inequity, how they must have felt to you." Her awareness seemed genuine, not performative. Remorse, but actual recognition of how her words and choices had contributed to our family's dysfunctional patterns. "We can't recover those years," I said. "But we can build something more authentic now if we're willing to see each other clearly, without the distortions of old expectations or roles." She squeezed my arm gently, her eyes reflecting both sadness for what had been lost and hope for what might still be possible. As the celebration continued, Megan arrived, coming directly from her hospital shift, still wearing scrubs under her coat. She had recently begun her residency at Boston Medical Center, specializing in community health with a focus on underserved populations. This career direction represented a significant evolution from the achievement-oriented path she had followed throughout our childhood. She was developing a professional identity based on service and impact rather than status or recognition, a shift that reflected her growing self-awareness and expanding perspective. "Sorry I'm late," she said, joining our small circle. "Complicated? Case just before shift change." "How's the residency going?" I asked, genuinely interested in her experiences. She considered the question thoughtfully. "Challenging, humbling, more meaningful than I expected." She glanced around at the celebration. "For our father's new venture, I'm learning that the work itself matters more than the external validation. That's something you understood long before I did." Her comment acknowledged a truth about our different developmental paths, how my lack of external support had forced me to find internal motivation and validation, while her abundance of encouragement had initially connected her achievements to external recognition rather than intrinsic meaning. "Different routes to the same realization," I observed. "But yours was unnecessarily difficult," she replied, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the advantages I had. Not just financial support, but confidence building, expectation, Of success? Constant reinforcement? I took all that for granted while you had to generate it entirely from within yourself. Her self-awareness impressed me, the willingness to examine not just the material inequities but the psychological advantages she had received throughout our childhood. I'm exploring ways to integrate that understanding into my practice, she continued. Working with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, helping them develop the internal resources that external circumstances often deny them. Her evolving approach to medicine reflected genuine growth, not just professional, skill development, but expansion of perspective and purpose. The entitled girl who had casually accepted a new car while my education remained unfunded was becoming a thoughtful woman conscious of privilege and responsibility. Later that evening, as the gathering began to disperse, my father approached me privately. "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small gift bag. Inside was a business card holder, simple, elegant, made of polished wood with Horizon Digital discreetly engraved on its surface. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely appreciating the thoughtfulness of the gift. "There's something else," he added, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. Beneath the card holder was an envelope. I opened it to find a check, substantial but not excessive, with "Investment in Horizon Digital" written on the memo. Line. "Dad, this isn't necessary," I began. He raised a hand to stop my protest. "It's not about necessity. Your company is thriving without my contribution. This is about—" He paused, searching for the right words. "About acknowledging what should have happened years ago. Not to ease my conscience, but to align my actions with my current understanding." The gesture contained complexity beyond simple restitution. It represented my father's evolving perception, his recognition of both past failures and present possibilities. "If you prefer, consider it an investment from one entrepreneur to another," he suggested, with no strings or expectations attached. I studied the check, considering its significance. Years earlier, this amount would have covered much of my Westlake tuition, the education denied while Megan received her car. Now it represented something different. Not desperately needed support, but symbolic acknowledgement, offered without manipulation or self-justification. "I accept," I said finally, "as an investment between colleagues, with appropriate documentation and terms." He nodded, understanding my need to frame the exchange professionally rather than emotionally. I would expect nothing less. The investment became part of Horizon Digital's expansion capital, supporting our growth into the Chicago WOW market. I insisted on proper legal documentation, treating my father's contribution with the same professionalism I would extend to any investor. This formality wasn't about maintaining distance, but about establishing healthy parameters for our evolving relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than the emotional complications of our shared history. As both our businesses developed, Horizon Digital expanding its national presence, Main Street Insurance Solutions establishing its niche in the small business market, we occasionally consulted each other on strategic questions or industry challenges. These exchanges were collegial and substantive, focused on professional insight rather than familial dynamics. My mother found her own renewal through returning to part-time teaching at Lakeside Community College, focusing particularly on non-traditional students balancing education with work and family responsibilities. Her evolving perspective on educational accessibility seemed influenced by our family's reckoning with privilege and opportunity. Megan completed her residency and joined a community health initiative in Boston, developing programs specifically for adolescents from disadvantaged backgrounds. Her work increasingly reflected awareness of structural inequities and commitment to addressing them through both clinical practice and policy advocacy. None of these evolutions erased the past inequities or recovered the supportive relationships that might have existed under different circumstances. But they created space for new connections based on who we each had become, rather than the limiting perceptions that had previously defined our family interactions. During a rare weekend when all four Wilsons found ourselves in Boston simultaneously, we gathered for dinner at my apartment. The conversation flowed with surprising ease. No hierarchical valuing of certain experiences over others. No automatic centering of Megan's achievements. No dismissal of my entrepreneurial perspectives. As we finished the meal, my father raised his glass in an uncharacteristic toast. "To paths taken and not taken," he said. "To second chances and new beginnings." The sentiment acknowledged both our family's complicated history and our current efforts toward more authentic connection. It represented neither excessive self-flagellation over past mistakes nor premature declaration of complete healing, just honest recognition of the journey we had undertaken together and separately. Later, as I cleared dishes from the table, my mother joined me in the kitchen. "I've been thinking about something," she said quietly. "That day with Megan's car, do you remember?" I nodded, surprised by her reference to the incident that had crystallized our family's inequitable dynamics. "I knew it was wrong even then," she admitted. "I saw your expression and recognized the unfairness. But I didn't speak up. I just went, along with what seemed easiest in the moment." Her confession contained no excuses or rationalizations, just honest acknowledgement of a moment when she had failed to advocate for fairness. "I've been asking myself why," she continued. "Why I consistently supported decisions that prioritized Megan's wants over your needs. I think part of it was simply path dependence, patterns established early that became automatic over time." "And the other part?" I prompted, appreciating her self-reflection. She hesitated before answering. "Fear, I think. Medical school offered a clear, established path with predictable outcomes. Your entrepreneurial ambitions seemed so uncertain, so potential-laden, but also risk-filled. Supporting Megan's conventional success felt safer than engaging with your more complicated journey." Her insight surprised me, not just its honesty, but its accuracy. My path had indeed been less conventional, requiring engagement with uncertainty and possibility rather than adherence to established trajectories. "Thank you for telling me that," I said, recognizing the courage it took to directly address these painful dynamics. She touched my arm briefly before returning to the dining room, the gesture conveying both regret for past failures and appreciation for current understanding. As the evening concluded and my family prepared to leave, I found myself reflecting on the distance we had traveled, not just in reconciling past hurts, but in developing more authentic ways of relating to each other in the present. The college fund that had purchased Megan's car would have provided a more direct path to educational credentials, but its absence had catalyzed something more valuable: the development of resilience, strategic thinking, and entrepreneurial capability that had shaped not just my professional success but my fundamental identity. This recognition didn't justify the inequity or excuse my parents' preferential treatment of their children, but it allowed me to appreciate how that difficult beginning had contributed to the person I had become, someone capable of building something substantial without external validation or support. Standing in my apartment after they had gone, I found myself drawn to the wall where I displayed Horizon Digital's achievements: awards, press coverage, client testimonials. These symbols of professional success represented something deeper than external validation. They reflected choices made and challenges overcome through my own determination and vision. What had begun as a painful moment of recognition, standing in a driveway watching my sister receive the car that should have been my education, had evolved into the catalyst for a life built on my own terms, according to my own understanding of what mattered. The journey hadn't been what I would have chosen at the beginning. The obstacles had been larger than necessary, the support less than deserved. But the destination, not just professional success, but authentic self-knowledge and purposeful impact, was one I wouldn't trade for any easier path. The car in our family driveway years ago had indeed been an investment, just not the one any of us had anticipated at the time. Up next, You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.